Hey everybody, welcome back to Ravenstead. It's time for another video. This is the last two tiles of the Hidden Valley series. Tile number 15 and 16. I've got them all glued up and I'm just going to carve these down with a craft knife. I don't cut myself, so don't worry about that. Tile number 15 is going to be kind of interesting. The last tile in the corner I decided to leave fairly plain, thinking that I could put some of my other scatter terrain on that tile. So this one has a little bit more interest though. So just matching those up to their neighbor tiles and carving them down, getting them all fitted together. There we go. Do a little texturing. Got a wire brush here I use on the edges where I want it to look like striated stone faces, and then a ball of rolled up aluminum foil, and that'll put in kind of a pebbly rough texture. I couldn't get into those areas, so I made a little piece of foil there that'll fit in. I get a little texture on that last tile there. Even though it's plain, it's still got to kind of continue on with our whole texturing and painting scheme. I'm going to keep on building this wall. I decided to terminate the wall in a tower here on this tile, so we'll just kind of move along pretty quickly building that up. That's a pretty good matchup. I taped the two tiles together there just so I could make sure I get the dimensions right and make sure everything looks good. One tile flowing into the other. I built this tower up pretty high. Fortunately, I remembered to paint the inside just in case you could see through the flooring that I'm going to put in later. I didn't want bright pink showing through. A couple of timbers I made with some foam. I textured those with the wire brush to give them a wood grain look, and then I'll just fit in the stones over top and around those timbers, and I'll lay in a wooden floor eventually. I decided to put some steps in there. I did make a little mistake here. I kind of went with the visual, what appealed to me visually. Not so much keeping in mind the 1-inch base on miniature. So the stairwell's really not all that playable, but it does look pretty cool. So anyway, just drive on. So if I were playing a scenario on these and I wanted a character on the steps, I would just have to say, hey, this miniature's on the steps. I'll put in the floor, a couple of planks laid in across there. So I'm using mostly just hot glue in this build. If you've seen some of my other videos, I use mostly hot glue. I just like how fast it goes. It does leave a lot of those glue strings on there that we have to get off later, but no big deal. I wanted to build a trapdoor for the top of the tower. Some way that you could, get into the storage area down below. It's a little piece of medium chipboard, some hot glue, and some strips of wood grain foam. And then I'll just glue that right onto the floor. Nothing too fancy. Gets the idea across. It did leave kind of a spot there where miniature base is kind of tipped a little bit, so I added a little debris in there to kind of even everything out. And we needed a little timber here to kind of hold up what's left of that rock wall. So that's looking pretty good. I'm just going to go ahead and prime this out with a mixture of black acrylic paint and Mod Podge. That'll kind of fill in gaps a little bit, give us a base for our shadows, and it helps to toughen up the foam a little bit too. Got to make sure you get those strings off of there though. Those glue strings look like hair once you paint them down. So we're ready for some dry brushing. A little dark gray. That'll be my base coat. And that'll go on all the stone surfaces. Then a light gray. So we start building our highlights and bringing out those shadows. And then we'll go in with a little medium brown for all the wooden parts. I have a feeling that's probably going to be our rotten plank there. I have this scenario in my head where monsters rush up to the wall and kick the timber out, and part of the wall falls over, and then you have to defend the gap that's left. That's a little bit of light brown. The name of that paint is actually cinnamon, so it's got kind of this yellow undertone. I really like it. And as you can see, I'm kind of a shaky Pete, so I tend to get paint everywhere. And I've just kind of built the paint scheme to kind of accommodate that. So it's no big deal. If you get a little bit of the wood paint on the stone, it all works out later on. So this is a light tan. That'll give us our really good highlights, make everything kind of pop out. And then some medium green. I'll go around with that. A little bit on the stone, kind of gives us a mossy look. And then on the flat surfaces where we'll be doing our texturing with flocking. And now our washes. This first one is a burnt umber acrylic ink mixed with water. A little bit of jet dry in there to help break the surface tension so we don't get a lot of bubbles. I like this over using black wash. I do use black wash. It has its purposes, but I like the brown a little bit better. It's not quite as stark. A little bright green mixed with water. And just kind of dab that on here and there. And then I'll finish off this piece with a little bit of Vallejo rust wash. So I just use that straight out of the bottle and actually just dribble it on. I'm using a wet on wet technique here. So actually using the terrain piece as palette. You could dip your brush into a pot of wash and then apply it, but I kind of like this method. And it's kind of slapdash too. It's fast. And that really mutes down when it dries. And then we'll be ready to do some flocking. So I'm going to paint on some PVA glue. This first coat is fine flocking. I like to build up the textures as I go. So I'll leave a few areas uncoated. You can see the gaps here and there. And I'll go in and paint some PVA glue back into those bald areas. And then I'm using a homemade mixture of preserved moss and yellow flower flocking. And I'll sprinkle that on and tap off the excess, and that starts to build up some interest. Put a little streak of it up there on the rocks to make it look viney. That's a mixture of PVA glue and water, really thin. I just sprinkle that on, and then medium flocking goes on. And then kind of blend in those glue halos. They'll dry out clear, but I like to sprinkle a little bit of fine flocking in there. Let's get some foliage in this build. I had a nice gap there that definitely needed a piece of lichen. So I just jam that in there. There we go. A couple of bits of clump foliage. A little more lichen on the top. This is good for hiding your mistakes too. So if you have an area that you missed, or a glob of hot glue that got painted over that doesn't look good, or to your liking, just stick a piece of foliage in there. No big deal. I'll put one more little piece here. A nice gap there that needed a little bush growing out of it. And I'm going to spin this piece and give you a look. This is it, folks. The end of the Hidden Valley series. Tile number 15 and 16. I've got some pictures here at the end. I'll show you some of the scatter terrain that I put into the piece there on that one blank tile. Appreciate you guys watching. Please leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you. If you've got ideas for the next build, I'm ready to kind of shift gears and go to something else. Maybe something sci-fi. There's that rotten plank just waiting to get kicked over. There it is with all the neighbor tiles. I've got a Kickstarter that's running. It's almost finished. I'll put a link in the description down below if you want to check it out. Please do. It's going to end this Saturday, March 16th, 2024. There it is, the Hidden Valley. Thanks for watching along the series. I really appreciate it.